Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
Look at me looking all relaxed.
Well, we can introduce it by the fact that you've had a bit of an incident.
Oh, that's true, mate. To be fair, that's true. Well, we're live and the red light's rolling, mate. Look at this. I've picked up these brand new flagship baseball caps with a 3D logo. I think they're dead smart, mate. What do you reckon?
That look cool, eh? I love that. Yeah, I love that.
It, mate. And look what else I've got.
Crutches. Wow.
No, mate. I feel a bit like Andy off Little Britain. I know Little Britain's not particularly politically correct anymore. Oh, that one.
So that's actually not a bad introduction really to this week, is it, Pete? Because we're talking about we're going to talk about contingency planning, and it's not just a fashion statement, that crutch, is it? You had a bit of a to do in the week, didn't you, Pete?
I did, mate. Yeah, I did. The nurse. I went to A&E. To get a scan because that's the only way you can get a scan these days. I didn't really feel it was an emergency, so I did feel a bit of a fraud going in. But the nurse said to me, she goes, "What are you doing still playing football?" I was like, "You're football, isn't it? A healthy lifestyle."
Yeah, that was my first thoughts when.
What are you doing playing football? She goes, and I'm like, oh, do you know what? I love football. I absolutely love it. I enjoy playing it, but maybe it's time for me to start my goalkeeping career.
Yeah.
Maybe I should become a goalkeeper.
Yes, I used to yearn to be in between. I was actually not a bad goalkeeper when I had a go at it, to be fair. But we first thought when you'd done that, you'd been tackled by a 9-year-old, but that's apparently not true. That's just a vicious rumour being spread about.
I'll be honest, I broke my foot when I was but a lad, probably about 20 years ago, quite badly. And a lot of the bones sort of like shattered in my foot. And and I've always had some ankle problems to sort of team with that. And this break up near the ankle as well was no good. And I'd got some sort of shards of bone that hadn't really properly healed. Anyway, so an incident on Tuesday has disrupted it a little bit and caused a bit of ligament damage. And it's all gravy, right? So hopefully a couple of days on the crutches and I'll be all right again. But I went swimming today.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, that's nice.
Maggie will tell you I can't not do stuff. I'm a little bit of a
you can't sit still. Yeah.
No, I'm a bit geared up, mate. I've always got to do stuff. So but no, all good. Anyway, you've been doing the director's OLAP today. Tell me about that.
Yes, it does. Yes, a course. I love this. It is a great course to deliver. It's the director's OLAP, and what that means is operator license awareness training. I think we all know in the industry we use the term OLAP to describe something that sort of goes through with senior managers. I'm doing one tomorrow. About their responsibilities towards the operator's license. Well, a director's OLAP is really good fun because you do it from a higher level. So you're sort of saying to the directors, well, look, you don't need to be doing these things on a day-to-day basis, but you need to know what your transport managers are doing. I feel like a bit like a game. Is it a poacher turned gamekeeper? That's the right way around. Telling sort of directors this is what you should be looking for. But did it with one of our customers today. Hopefully it went very well. Hopefully they've taken some out of it. But I think it's a real, without getting too pluggy, I think it's a really valuable. It's a half-day course that we do, and I think it's a really valuable one for anybody who's a director of a business or maybe senior management and what have you. But really enjoyed it. Yeah, great.
Brilliant. Great. Fantastic. Okay, so what are we talking about today, mate? What are we talking about? Contingency.
Kind of your foot incident segues nicely into our podcast for today, which is contingency planning for operators, because you never know what's around the corner, do you? You never know when it's going to happen. Myself and Pete went to. Where did we go to? Where did we go in the week? We went somewhere. Been on jollies this week as well, haven't we?
We did go on the jolly this week, mate. We went on a nice old jolly to Freight People, which was organised by Leslie O'Brien from Freight Train and Freight Link Europe. I think her businesses are called. Leslie
session with
O'Brien,
like-minded people.
OBE. Yeah, she was. It was good, wasn't it? It's held over at Tesco Daventry, wasn't it? Which was interesting, near Durft.
Yep. Yeah, very good.
You chauffeured me, didn't you?
I did indeed, because after no, that was before the leg, wasn't it? Yeah, that was
It was that evening. It was that evening that I hurt myself. Yeah. We caught up with old industry friends. We caught up with Karen from Convey and James Adcroft. What a gent he is.
He is indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. What a top chap. So it was a good event, wasn't it? It was interesting because they were talking about security, weren't they?
Security. Yeah. And I think we can touch on that today. With security, in terms of the risks that fleet. Interesting. One thing I definitely took away from that was we talked about we had a couple of presentations from some police officers, and they talked about the if something happens with a heavy goods vehicle, like a theft of or a theft from a heavy goods vehicle, they treat it exactly the same way as a theft from a car. If somebody broke into your car and nicked your Duran Duran cassettes, Google it later, Pete.
It reminded me, actually, as a lad, I had a big subwoofer in my boot of my Mark III Volkswagen Golf, which was the second car I owned, and that got stolen. It got broken into. I had a 12-disc changer. That's wrong.
That is, and that's how the police treat it. They treat a crime from a heavy goods vehicle in exactly the same way as it's theft from a motor vehicle. So therefore, the tariffs are, in terms of punishment, if the miscreants do get caught, the punishment's very low. So it's a low risk crime for the baddies, and that's why that they do it, and it is quite prevalent. And we learned about something called a jump up, and I don't know if you're aware of jump ups, Pete, but they jump onto the back of a moving goods vehicle, open the rear doors, especially if they're slide up doors, and nick stuff, and this is apparently part of organised crime gangs and stuff. So it was great. We've got some good stuff. So we talk about, and security can come into what we're going to be talking about today. But what I wanted to explore was it's a bit doomy and gloomy when you read the news at the moment, listen to the news. They're talking about power cuts being a reality, through this winter. Now, it might just be the government trying to prepare us for the worst and it not happen, and we all feel a lot better for it. But what would you do as an operator, as a heavy goods vehicle operator, if you had no power? If you had to... now, I'm a child of the 70s. When I was growing up in the 70s, we had a 3-day week. And a 3-day week was caused by power stations not being able to supply power because the coal miners were on strike and they couldn't supply the coal into the power stations. So I remember, back in those days, of course, it didn't make a lot of difference. But can you imagine a scenario now where you haven't got any power, any electricity? What do you reckon? What sort of things do you think an operator, Pete, would have trouble with if they didn't have power?
Jesus, I just started to try and comprehend what the impact would look like, but it's I was busy thinking about how funny it'd be if Harry edited the podcast and he stopped you just as you're about to say power, and literally there was just a white noise in the background of the podcast. We just had a power cut. But anyway, my warped sense of humour aside, what would happen if an operator's lights went out and they lost power? It's just nuts to think about it, isn't it? So they need to think about data backup is a starting point. Data backup is really, really important, and the IT security and their data there. I think they need to think about the security of their premises. As another thing. But operationally, it kind of just blows my mind what would happen if everything just grinded to a halt.
Mobile phone, you'd have no phone system because landlines are all powered these days by they're the switchboards and what have you. So there's no. It might be worthwhile operators keeping an old analog phone somewhere that they can plug into the system. But don't use old analog phones. Interestingly, the old dial. They didn't use electricity. The electricity came down through the telephone wires, so they didn't need power. But all the modern phones need power, don't they? You have to plug a phone.
Yeah, no, exactly. So mobile phones will be going dead. Wi-Fi won't be working. there's only so long the little Amazon battery boxes all add a bit of charge to you.
And a bit of juice to it. So I think,
like, literally, it blows my brains. The whole world's gonna, like, it feels like the apocalyptic is basically what I'm thinking. I can't really think much further ahead than just literally apocalyptic.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
I'm going to make some presumptions here. I'm going to presume the government would, or the powers that be, would give us some warning, give us some notice. I'm going to also presume that they would prioritise businesses to stay open, because that's what pays the country's wages, isn't it? So, we're looking at worst case scenario here. But I'll tell you what got me thinking about this as well. And I'm probably going back here 15 years, but to a time where we still had lots of computerized stuff. We had transport management systems, we had emails, believe it or not, back in those days. We had, and the biggest one for us, I'll come to that in a minute when I tell you the story, but the biggest one for us was the fuel pumps. We couldn't get any fuel out of the fuel pumps because obviously the fuel pumps were all electric. We had on-site fuel. What it was, the story was, the company I used to work for, an operator I used to work for, mid-sized, 106 odd vehicles, warehousing and all the rest of it. And what it was, we were a bit remote where we were, big operating centre, but it was a little bit remote. And they were doing some roadworks on the only sort of road in. And somebody went through a mains cable with a digger. And that was it. And we were plunged into darkness, and it was 3 days before they restored the power.
Wow.
Now, the first thing that the owners of the business did after that was invest in a generator and get that up and running and plugged in. But even that leads to problems when the generator cuts in. Is the generator definitely going to work? So there's a lot to think about, isn't there, Pete? As you say, mind blown.
Yeah, absolutely blows my mind, to be fair. And I just, even down to, like, you just won't be able to work, will you? And no. I guess businesses will continue, even though they can't provide work, a lot of their employed people, they've still got to find the wages, and they've still got to try and crack on as best they can. I find it, don't get me wrong, we probably couldn't have perceived or conceived that the pandemic would happen, could we?
No.
So, and I think obviously the pandemic has increased our resilience to an extent about whether we need to work, whether we can work from home and those kinds of things. But the thought of losing utility such as power is just absolutely, it's just massively taken for granted, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, back in the 70s, it wasn't a great big deal. Okay, we couldn't watch the telly for a bit and we had to have candles. And I remember Mum getting one of those Primus stoves out and cooking some soup. But, back now it would be horrific, wouldn't it? But
I guess the vehicles are still going to be able to operate, aren't they? The vehicles themselves are still going to be able to operate, but it's about being able to
service your customers.
And organise, manage, and service customers, isn't it? It's going to be the challenge.
The challenge is, and the challenge we'll probably put out to the operators, to you, dear listeners, is consider what is your minimum level of service that you could provide with no electricity. What would be your minimum sort of thing that you could do for your customers? And I guess really work around that. If the worst came to the worst, what is it you could possibly do as a minimum to keep your customers moving and to keep your lorries moving and to keep your money coming in? So that's probably worth considering, isn't it? That's the moving on then. So just aside to that, one of the other things that we listened to a good presentation from quite a well-known sort of solicitor in the transport world, and she brought something back to me as well in terms of what would you do as an operator if the worst should happen? This is a very depressing episode, this, isn't it? What would you do if the worst was to happen? In terms of your business, in terms of receiving news that one of your vehicles had just received a PG9 prohibition at the side of the road, one of your vehicles have been involved in a serious road traffic collision, or one of your drivers has hit a bridge, these catastrophic events that occur from time to time, what is your planning? That's I think, and that was a really good challenge, wasn't it, Pete, that we heard about? What would you suggest operators think about when it comes time for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most operators should have thought about a bridge strike policy or procedure of some description that will include a process that's followed in the event that it occurs. Likewise, preventative measures. And I think most people will think about preventative measures around training and route planning and the things that they can do to avoid, because essentially, these things are avoidable. However, when you listen to Rick Wenham, who heads up the Met commercial vehicle unit, he clearly stated that there was a bridge strike in London where they'd resurfaced the road. So the height, they'd not changed the height on the bridge, and the height on the bridge was less. Was less than what the the driver was within his rights to go through and would have gone through under normal conditions because his cab and vehicle was under the height of the bridge, so there wouldn't have been an issue. But obviously it had been resurfaced, and therefore there wasn't the advertised height capacity. So there's a little bit of false advertising there. We'll come to that another day. And the drivers hit it nonetheless. So obviously that's going to have a real impact, depending on the size of the operation. That's going to have a real impact on the business if particularly the smaller the number of vehicles, that's a bigger percentage impact on their business for each asset that's out of use for that period of time. But certainly, I think operators really need to think about what is the plan in that event? How do they speak to the driver? How are they going to, knowing in advance that they're going to need to get tachograph data from it. They're going to need to get the information they need from the vehicle before it goes and gets recovered and goes in for repair. Because one of the issues now is, vehicles that are involved with those kinds of incidents. We've got issues with back ordered parts. We've got workshops that are absolutely stacked to the gunnels. They can't get staff. These things become a big problem. And actually, how are you going to continue to operate? Where are you going to get the vehicle from to replace that? Or are you going to be able to cope with your existing fleet and your existing fleet of drivers? What is that driver going to do? And how are you going to manage that situation? And who speaks to the traffic commissioner and when, and who carries out the incident investigation? And how are we going to get someone there? There's a lot to think about.
People think this industry is just pointing a lorry in one direction and hoping it gets there, isn't it? But there's so much more to it. You're absolutely right. And one of the other interesting points that this presenter made was that in terms of today's world with social media, how do you control the flow of information? Now, not trying to cover anything up, but how do you as a business negate against reputational loss, controlling the amount. And I think that's probably a question of having some sort of social media policy in place for your workers. I'm the last one to sort of try to block free speech, as it were. But, as a business, those people work for you, and they have a duty of care to all their other fellow employees, not to reputationally damage the business. But, when people start putting stuff on Facebook and, it just gets round and round and round and round, doesn't it? And, that was interesting. I never kind of thought about it from that perspective before.
I think ultimately an operator's got to focus on being able to control the controllables, haven't they?
Yes, absolutely.
To an extent, once an incident occurs with one of their liveried vehicles, there's a lot of stuff that can go out of their control straight away. For example, members of the public taking photos and putting things out there. So that is something that needs a contingency plan. What happens if they have an absolute PR disaster? How are they going to batten down the hatches and pretend it hasn't occurred, or do they try and control? How do they try and control the narrative? If there's potentially, and obviously the bigger the business, the more potentially damaging that incident could be. A really good example was an operator who is relatively local to the flagship business, had an agency driver who was stopped, had a check and drug and alcohol test carried out whilst he was parked up in a lay-by in a liveried vehicle, and failed the drug test. And the police took a photo of that vehicle and posted it on their Twitter. And actually, the company weren't even aware. They weren't even aware. They'd not been made aware that this
until they see it plastered all over social media.
Until it was plastered all over social media.
Yeah.
Which is, it didn't say the company, and this is the tricky thing, right? It didn't say the company name, because the police will go, well, it's anonymous. It doesn't say the company name. But if a company has clearly defined colours, for example, this company had a couple of coloured stripes, which were two different colours, very, very noticeable for anyone who recognised that regional-based business. And all of a sudden, people are sharing that, they're retweeting it, it's going onto Facebook. Look at this company's driver, bloody, on drugs behind the wheel. And it's just blown up for them. How do they respond to that? What is it they do from a starting point of, have they got everything they need in place for all the checks that have been carried out for that driver? Have they got a rogue driver, and can they demonstrate they've got a rogue driver and they've controlled the controllables
as much as they can?
As much as they possibly can. But also, how are they going to manage that situation from a PR, from a public relations point of view?
When it hits, We, of course, would be delighted to help any companies put together a contingency plan. We always try not to plug too much, don't we, on these things? But we, of course, but then again, our mantra would be prevention is always better than the cure. So, if we don't want operators to ever be in that position, but I think we've kind of built up a little bit of knowledge in this area, and I think that's something we could definitely do going forward. So, but that's a bit depressing. Let's start. There's the moral of the story is don't know when it's time to give up playing football. I think you've probably learned that this week, Pete. And as operators, you think about this issue with the fuel and over the winter, not the fuel, the power over the winter, and how would you cope with that? And think also about what would you do if the worst was to happen, a bridge strike, a road traffic collision, and the rest of it. Because having experienced many of these items over the years, it comes at you thick and fast. And it always comes at you at the least time where normally happens at the most inconvenient time. Friday afternoon, you're just about to go home, you're just about to put the cat out, switch the computers off, and all of a sudden,
just as you're about to go on holiday for 2 weeks.
Boom. Always comes up at the worst time. And so there we go. I hope you've enjoyed that one, folks.
Absolutely. As a final thought, I'm going to give you my 6 Ps. Pete, 6 Ps. Well, 7 Ps if you include Pete. So that's 7 Ps. Pete, proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Yeah, it's a known adage, that one. It's a well-known one, that one.
Love that. Right, Mike, see you on the next one.
See you on
Everyone
the next
listening?
one,
good to see you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.